Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sports Tonight. I'm your host, Jake Geigel, and this is the Vince Carter episode number 25. And yes, I'm aware that it has been a while, but we are back and better than ever. There is quite a bit to talk about in the sports world, most notably NBA free agency and the upcoming release of the new EA Sports College Football 25 video game, which has been a very hot topic of discussion over the past few years and especially over the past few months leading up to the release in just a few weeks. Beginning with NBA free agency, there are quite a few bigger names on the outs of their old team and into new teams. The biggest name that is no longer on his previous team is Paul George, who is now officially part of the Philadelphia 76ers as he signed a 4-year, $212 million deal with a player option for the 2027 to 2028 season. Along with that, the 76ers were also able to retain Tyrese Maxey and extended his contract for 5 years worth 204 million total. One of the more unfortunate issues has been that the Warriors and Klay parted ways. Klay Thompson signed a 3-year, $50 million contract as a part of a sign and trade, and that sign and trade features Klay Thompson going to the Dallas Mavericks, in which Dallas is sending two second-round picks back to Golden State, one of which is its own 2031 second rounder. So, in essence, probably kid in middle school or high school. But enough about that. The Celtics, after winning their 18th NBA Finals, retained both Derek White and Jason Tatum. Derek White on a 4-year, $125 million extension, and Tatum, who now has the largest contract in history at 5 years, $314 million total. And another Eastern Conference team making a move, if you will, is the Cleveland Cavaliers, who were able to retain Donovan Mitchell for 3 years, $150 million there. And also, early this morning, 8:27 Eastern, free agent LeBron James agreed to sign a 2-year, $140 million contract to return to the Lakers, who now have his son, Ronnie James, with the after they picked him late in the second round. That deal includes a player option and a no trade clause, which there are still ways that he can be traded, but that's very, very unlikely. And unfortunately for the Clippers, they weren't able to do much after losing Paul George other than retaining James Harden. And so for them, they at least the 76ers also agreed to sign Kelly Oubre Jr. on a 2-year, $16.3 million deal to stay with the franchise. So, and that includes a player option for the second half of that deal. And moving on from that, I'd like to take a little bit of time to discuss, arguably, in terms of the college football world, one of the biggest excitements in a while. After 11 long years in that for those fans, EA has finally really releasing College Football 25. And there were some doubters out there. They were like, "We'll believe it when we see it," but it is finally here, and we have seen it. And there are a few things I want to talk about first before I get into their latest news, and those are the top 10 rankings in various different aspects of the game. So, to start, there is a new wear and tear system that I think I personally am all for. I think it would and frustrate some people at the beginning, but I think it's a very good feature because, for example, say each player is going to have hot spots on their physique or body, and if a right-handed quarterback takes a shot to his throwing arm a bunch of times, his accuracy and how far he's able to throw is going to be affected. It's going to decrease. And then over time, that'll just naturally happen regardless over a game. Or say you have a game that goes into like four overtime. That's a long time to play. So they're gonna be more worn out. Mm. The second thing when it comes to this that I was a little bit on the fence for, but I now that I've thought about it more, I think it'll be worth it. They are introducing 80 different abilities, and don't think of these like in counterparts compared to a game like Madden. They're purely situational based, and there are zero guarantees at all. And so those abilities are categorized into two groups, physical and mental. And all of them are divided into tiers for to be exact, bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. And so the most anybody can have at a given time is eight total, five physical and three mental. And so, for example, one of the instances take their new grip breaker ability under the physical category. This ability bolsters a defender's capability to disengage from a block, and at the bronze and silver tiers, it's only applicable during run plays. However, at the higher levels, it can also apply to pass plays with significantly amplified effects. And also keep in mind, not everybody can have the same abilities. It's merely determined by the and the mental abilities on the other hand, are only dictated by the position of the player. Another example is they wanted to have these in the game, but also keep gameplay balance at the forefront of their development. And an example that they give is the new Pocket Shield ability. And this progressively makes offensive linemen hold blocks better than your standard pass plays. And so, however, even at the highest level of this, it doesn't apply if the distance to the first down is more than 10 yards. So you have to stay on schedule to reap the benefits. Even at the platinum level, it is possible for them to lose that engagement. Another super cool aspect, I believe, will be in this is the new pre-snap recognition, where if you have a true freshman starting on the road against Penn State, for example, one of the, if not the loudest stadium in all of college football, definitely one of the loudest. You see I forget which team it was, but there's videos of like opposing quarterbacks, their first drive, the shaky hands, the nervousness. Whereas maybe you don't see that with the seasoned senior or a player who has played in many big moments. And they have that here, where if there is a certain ability, the broad field general ability, where at the lowest level, glitches are highlighted only after the snap. So it's a basic level of awareness. And the next tier, players can spot blitzes before the snap, but only if they're close to the line of scrimmage and only for a second. The next tier unveils a coverage shell momentarily, giving players a glimpse into the defense coverage. And at the highest level, a platinum tier allows players to see even disguised shells, but again, briefly. And so this makes it so the defensive player or the whoever you're playing against, or if you're doing like a solo dynasty or whatever, they can make the adjustments too. And confidence and composure is in this game, so up and downs, hot or cold, player, depending on the outcome of each play. And again, experience plays a role. Freshman player will have more seasoned swings compared to a person who has played so many more games. This is just, and finally, for the last part of this section, this is just an ease of experience thing. The victory formation, basically, eventually, once the other team is out of timeouts and the game is mathematically over, just take a knee. The players will automatically come onto the field, and the rest of the knees will be simulated. So you don't have to take 3, 4 knees to end the game. It's just one, and you're done. We and with that, going to take a short break, and then after that, I really want to dive into their Dynasty deep dive mode. And with that, we will be back momentarily. And with that, I skipped a few things on my list of notes here. So, real quickly, I want to talk about some of the rankings that they released within in the last week and a half. So, to start, we have the top 10 toughest places to play, top offenses, top defenses, and then strictly just the top overall rankings or power overalls or whatever you want to describe it as. And some of these, I will admit, they were fairly controversial, and even yet, I still don't really understand some of them. To start, the top 10 toughest places to play are starting from 1, Texas A&M, Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, Georgia, Penn State, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Florida State, and Florida. Now, all of these stadiums are loud. I I get that. It makes sense. However, one thing I will say is I don't think Penn State should be at number 6. I think they should be higher. And the reason that I say this is because if you've ever seen a game or been to a game Penn State whiteout game. It is absolutely insane. It is beyond loud. Loud enough to make an opposing quarterback before his very first snap have shaky hands, as I said just a few moments ago. So you will have to let me know what you think of that list. And this is the next set of rankings. What they released following that were the top offenses. And these I can understand. And they gave a little bit more reasoning behind these. And so what they had stated was that when it came to ranking offenses specifically, and especially the offenses, they looked at teams with more experienced quarterbacks or quarterbacks who had been with this specific program for more than a few years. And so, starting off at number 1 through 10, we have Georgia, Oregon, Alabama, Texas, Ohio State, LSU, Miami, Colorado, Missouri, and Clemson. Now, I can't remember off the top of my head what Clemson offense looked like in terms of stats last year. But if I know one thing about college football, it's that Colorado was 4-8 last year, and they weren't that impressive otherwise. And I will say this. In terms of Colorado, there, for all we know, there could be 25 teams with the same rating as them on the offensive side of the ball. But they just chose to show Colorado because they knew people would talk about it in the media world. And rightfully so, they were right. People have. But I think you should have found a better place for them. Because do we really think they're better on the offensive side of the ball than Missouri? Just with Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter? I'd At this point I'd pick Missouri, and especially if I had to take any one aspect of Missouri over Colorado, if not their starting quarterback and their number one wide receiver, it would be the offensive line, without a doubt. In terms of Clemson, their team stats for this past year, they put up 29, almost 30 points a game. Sounds good. 49 touchdowns, 300 first downs, or about 40% of completion on third down, had a net passing yards of almost 3,000, 6.3 per attempt, 228 per game, only threw 9 interceptions. In terms of total yards, had just over 5,200 yards per game, just over 400 yards per game. And so you can make of that what you will. But I th- you could say that. But secondly, following that, they released the best defenses. And moving on from that, starting at number one, we have Ohio State, who on paper arguably has the best defense in college football this year. Moving on from that, especially with Caleb Downs transferring in from Alabama, you could make a case he could be the best defensive player in all of college football this year. Number two, we have Georgia, then Oregon, Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, Michigan, Texas, and Penn State and Utah. Now, if I were to make one thing or two changes on this list, it'd be to move up Michigan and Penn State to 5 and 6. And you can have argument or conversations about which order that would go in. Maybe even higher. Maybe you have them in the top three. Maybe you have them above Alabama. I don't know. I'm not sure. But I think other than that, I don't have too many issues with this. I think Utah, you could make the case Utah could be slightly higher because especially with Kyle Whittingham and his tenure there. That's always been their strong suit is on the defensive side of the ball. So yes. And finally, moving to just the top ranked teams, offense, defense included, combined. Starting at number one, we have Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Alabama, Texas, Clemson, Notre Dame, LSU, Penn State, and Utah. And I'm okay with Utah being on this list, especially with Cam Rising coming back. At this point, they have the current best odds to win the Big 12. Clemson has the best odds to win the ACC, which maybe Florida State should. I think there's a case for that. But other other than maybe changing a few of the order, there's really not too many issues with this. I mean, yes, Alabama lost Nick Saban, but they replaced them with a pretty solid coach, really good coach actually, one of the best options that you had. Maybe not your first choice, but at that time there were reports that Steve Sarkisian and Dan Lanning were the one and two, and then Kalen DeBoer, which obviously they got Kalen DeBoer from Washington, who is fantastic coach, won everywhere he's been, won at Indiana, at multiple places. Obviously made the national championship game with Washington last year and lost to a really good Michigan team. So those are your top rated offenses, defenses, and teams, and toughest places to play. And now, briefly, or for the last 20 or so minutes, I want to talk about the EA Sports College Football Dynasty mode, which that deep dive was released yesterday, July 2nd of 2024, just a few days before the release of the game. Couple things to start. In terms of your online dynasties out there for everybody, you can have up to 32 teams. It could go up to 30 seasons. And I'll have their EA Sports College Football deep dive as well up, and I will post that in the description with this podcast as well, this episode. And there are quite a few things to talk about. Number one, they had a few pillars in this mode expect to really hit home. Number one, build your coach, build your program, and deliver the world of college football. And then underneath that, they said there was one singular motto: satisfy this core community because this is their game. So you obviously have tons of people that are looking to really hit home with this game. And I think they have the opportunity to do it. Number one, to start any of your dynasties, you have to build your coach. And as meaningful and it's an experience that you can have. They met with college football coaches, both present, past, and experts, and started breaking down the real life coaches on their whiteboard. What was the identity? What made them great? And how did they get to where they were today? What they found is mostly they fit into broadly into three main categories. Some were incredible recruiters, others were insane motivators who maximize potential of players. And lastly, the tacticians, the X's and O's that outsteam their opponents. So, in terms of who you are able to start as, you have one of those three options, and each of them has their own skill tree. And you, the way that they figured it out was that no coach was great at everything, and there isn't a single way to become a great coach. And so what they found is another thing, coordinators and how you build that staff is important. And so in terms of increasing your level of your coach or your coordinator, because you're able to start right from the head coach or offensive and defensive coordinator, and then progress to a head coach. You're able to the four coach speed goals, which are single game, weekly, season, or career goals. And so pro draft goals, individual game goals, recruiting, like sign a sports professional prospect, or sign the best class in the country, or for weekly goals, be ranked in the top 10, 4,000 team passing yards, or win 5 national championships, stuff like that. And you can also adjust how fast you earn that experience and be able to increase your level as well. And in terms of the abilities that you achieve, again, very similar to just the player abilities. And so when it comes to something like recruiting, not every coach is going to be great in every position. They're all going to specialize in a more specific group. So like quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, running back, fullback, defensive line, linebackers, safeties, cornerbacks, things like that. And there's defensive counters to all those offensive abilities, like getting better run defense. And so every time that you decide to start or accept a new job, whichever, you're obviously given a goal, performance expectations. And just like real life, failure to meet those consistently will result in bad things happening, i.e., getting fired. If you leave that on, of course. And so those expectations are determined by current team prestige and program standing, and obviously, the better the school, the better the expectations. So, for example, there are four levels of expectations: win X number of games, win a conference championship, make the college football playoff, and win a national championship. And throughout the season, your job security will fluctuate. And if it gets too low, you'll be put on the hot seat. And if it gets even lower, you will be fired. And on the other side, exceeding or meeting your goal will result in increased job security of that. And all of those coaches that you're able to, like as coordinators or even yourself, you all have letter grades that range from A plus to F. And so coach prestige is reflective of the ability to meet those expectations, adjusted for the school that you're at and role that you have. So for example, meeting expectations and winning 5 games at a small school will have a significantly smaller impact than winning the SEC championship at a traditional powerhouse school like Alabama or Georgia, for example. And at the end of your contract of 4 years or whatever it may be, the school will evaluate whether or not they want to extend your contract based on that performance. And if you're offered an extension, you will be notified of that and it will be automatically accepted. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't change jobs afterwards in the coaching carousel at any point of that contract or at the end of each season. And the reason that they said the reason that they auto accept those extensions is to prevent inadvertently protect you protect you from inadvertently changing jobs if you sim past an extension offer without interacting with it. So you can't accidentally sim past the contract extension at a place like Alabama and win and not interact it, so you end up at Memphis, for example. And another thing with the job security is every win and loss counts towards an expectation, obviously. So, and with that being said, an important thing is not all of those wins and losses are created equal. So, beating a higher ranked team will obviously have a larger impact than beating one of the generic FCS teams. Whereas on the flip side, losing to a generic FCS team as a Division One team or a Power Four conference team is not something you want to do. And one note, the generic FCS teams look to be very similar to those of like YouTube, old YouTube dynasties on the previous game or college football revamped, which is kind of a cool nod to those guys. And moving on more specifically to the coach carousel, after 2021 2022, both LSU and USC were looking for coaches, and both of them hired elite coaches from other very high profile schools in Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley. So suddenly, Oklahoma and Notre Dame were doing the same thing. So in college football 25, it's domino effect. Instead of it happening over a single week, it now takes course of 5 weeks from conference championship to the end of the bowl season. And for example, in an online dynasty, it's an experience where each user can evaluate their offers without the need to wait on someone else. So, for example, no, not everybody, you won't just be waiting or held up because you're waiting for your friend to evaluate that offer only for them to want to stay at their current job. And so during conference championship week, all coach contracts are processed and the schools determine whether they want to fire, extend, or just let a contract expire. And regardless of what position you are. You'll get a action item notifying you. And if you're a head coach also, will be able to fire your coordinators during this week. And after that, you advance in bowl season. The first round of job offers go out, and if you received any, you'll be notified. And just because you don't receive jobs in the first week doesn't mean you won't receive them prior, because again, they're taking very real life experience where the coach carousel takes place over the course of multiple weeks. The first week of bowl season is just the beginning. As schools hire and poach coaches from other schools, their previous jobs will become unavailable as unexpected job openings. And there is another thing. Once you accept an offer from any school, no matter what, you will stay with your current school until after the national championship, and that's when all of them are processed. And it allows you to take part with your current team in the one last ride and coach any bowl games that you have, or playoff games or whatnot, what have you. And clearly, it, like things that schools look for when they determine who they want to hire, the higher they are, the more abilities, the STEAM, like military, so like Army, Navy, they're looking for specific style of offense or defense, and archetypes, so your program, like for example, blue blood schools prefer elite coaches who are a program builder or CEO, and the coach's recruiting pipeline. So, for example, Florida may look for somebody with the pipeline of Central Florida. Because, like, unlike in the previous game, a pipeline isn't going to just be whole states. It's going to be very specific areas and aspects of that. And lastly, coach prestige. And like for example, a team like Georgia isn't going to want someone who is only a C minus coach prestige. And lastly, they're just talking about recruiting. They built three different distinct phases of recruiting: discovery, pitch, and close. And just like real life, every recruit will be in a different stage of that process at different times. And so where they are in their process will determine how you can interact with them and engage with their require. So discovery, you are finding perhaps what's the target, what their skills are, and what they care about most. And it's all about uncovering information as quickly as possible. And after the school announces their top five schools, so it goes from 10 to 8 schools to 5 to 3 finally. So top five schools, it's the pitch phase, and then you're selling your recruit on your program will what you offer and how well your school aligns with their motivations or will determine how successful you are. And the final stage is close, where you would bring them in on an official visit. If that visit goes well, you could maybe secure a verbal commit. However, the recruits will not make their final decision until National Signing Day, which is in the game. So is verbal signing day. But there are a few things that every school is graded on, 14 to be exact, ranging from D minus to A plus. And those are playing time, playing style, championship contender, program tradition, campus lifestyle, stadium atmosphere, pro potential, brand exposure, academic prestige, conference prestige, coach stability, athletic facilities, and proximity to home. For example, when it comes to academic prestige, you're very likely to see teams like recruits that value that they're really interested to be interested in places like Stanford, UCLA, Rice, Northwestern, Purdue, the teams with higher levels of academics. Now that doesn't mean you can't convince them to come to your school in some other way. And pro potential, if they're really focused on giving to that next level, is like a 5 star, maybe even a 4 star. They're going to want to play for a team like Alabama, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, to name a few. And again, same thing kind of goes with that, the conference prestige, and that encompasses the entire conference, each individual team prestige as a whole, their coach prestige, how high of a head coach and coordinators. Head coach obviously carries the most weight, and their coaching stability, how long the coaching staff has been in place, and how likely they are to remain there for the 4 years that they're in school. And a last and another one is how close they are to that school's or recruit's pipeline. And in terms of finding like different actions that you can do, you can offer them scholarship, and that will give you a small weekly influence with that prospect. You can start social media, DM the player, contact their friends and family, or send the house, which pretty much sends everything you have as them uh, available to them. And each recruit will care about a total of at least three motivations marked by a green check mark. So right at say, don't care as much about it. And after that stage, stage two, pitch, it's soft sell or hard sell. Soft sell is awards a moderate amount when choosing the correct pitch. It limits the downside and penalty of pitching on something they don't care about. And hard sell is when largest penalty if you pitch the wrong thing, but the most influence when you use the correct pitch. Or it's just you're desperate and you're hoping for the best. Or if you know the ideal pitch type. For example, and then finally, stage three, the closed stage, bring them in for an official visit and attempt to leave a lasting impression. And in order to schedule a visit with a prospect, they must be down to their top 5 schools, and you need to have offered them a scholarship. A recruit can only take an official visit to a school when they're on a bye week or they have a home game. And you can host up to 4 recruits in a single week, 40 recruiting hours, scheduling and recruiting, or scheduling and activities. And other prospects can have positive or negative bonuses. For example, having a quarterback or a wide receiver or a quarterback and a left tackle will have boosts, whereas scheduling 2 quarterbacks, which is like a competitive visit, will have negative effects. And finally, they have all of the new conferences, the realignment, the 12-team playoff that you get experience for the first time in the game, and you have the ability to change different settings for like bow tying games and whatnot, and what have you. And so, yes, thank you for listening today. I greatly appreciate it, and have a great rest of your